Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com, here with your hurricane outlook and discussion for Monday the 27th of June. Taking a look at sea surface temperature anomalies for today. This is pretty much fresh off the press here. And you can see warm in the tropical Atlantic for the most part, warm in the western Atlantic, Caribbean, and Gulf. And then we have this cold tongue coming in the Pacific. Not very strong. Still a lot of warm water to the north here. So, things are pretty much where we thought they would be. The La Nina, still not technically a La Nina yet, but some of these anomalies in here getting close. Report from the Climate Prediction Center today indicating that the average temperature across this region here, what we call the Nino 3.4 region, you got to remember that the ENSO region out here, the El Nino Southern Oscillation, is divided up into these different areas. And the Nino 3.4 sitting out here roughly is one of the big measuring sticks that most people use when describing what's happening with the current state of the El Nino Southern Oscillation. So right now, that number is negative 0.40. There we go. Terrible writing, but you get the idea. So it's getting there, usually about a half a degree, and then lower is more towards the La Nina threshold. And it's getting there, and we're going to need a pretty strong surge of trade winds across here on a sustained basis for this to really take off, and we're just not seeing that quite yet due to pressure patterns and the warm PDO here in the Pacific. It's all very complicated, but for the most part, everything is pretty much the way we thought it would be, sea surface temperature-wise, maybe a little bit warmer than I think a lot of people were expecting here in the deep tropics, but we're still about 45 days away from that really starting to matter. Looking at the subsurface temperatures, this is interesting. This is updated a few days ago, always lagging behind. Here's your cold subsurface water, but then you have sort of this resurgence of some positive anomalies out in the western Pacific. The trade winds just not quite as strong out here to help mix all of this up and bring this cold water to the surface and then push it westward. Maybe that'll happen over time, but against that warm Pacific as a whole, what we call the warm Pacific decadal oscillation, this is having some trouble doing so. But that's a lot of cold water in the subsurface, and it extends all the way from the eastern side of the Pacific way over to the western side. So thousands of miles of cold water to a depth of more than 150 meters. So weak La Nina conditions by the fall wouldn't surprise me in the least. All right, so what's going on out there? We've looked at some of the diagnoses, if you will. Is that how you say that? The analysis and diagnosis tools, whatever. Now let's take a look at some satellite pictures and see if we can pick out any trouble areas, and really we can't. It's been such a, what do you call it, a dearth of activity? Is that the word? Certainly have not had anything in the eastern Pacific to speak of this hurricane season. No named storms yet. We do have a fairly active intertropical convergence zone, but nothing really to kick anything off. You can see, look at that little outline there. Very stable air moving its way down almost into the tropics. The eastern Pacific by this time last year was very busy, and this year nothing, no tropical storms or anything, so it's pretty remarkable. Heading to the east, to our part of the world, where most people watch this video anyway, intertropical convergence zone, almost non-existent. It's pretty squashed far to the south here. I'll highlight it in yellow. And then a little bit more of a flare-up of it again as we see the eastern portion of that from the other satellite perspective, this full disk shot. Little upper-level feature right here. But you can tell there's just general sinking motion in the atmosphere over the Atlantic Basin right now, because there's not much convection. We're in the sort of the dry phase, if you will, of the Madden-Julian oscillation. I'll talk about that more in a minute. And finally, out in the tropical Atlantic and the African continent, clusters of thunderstorms, as you would expect, over the very hot equatorial regions of Africa, and then offshore from there in the main development region. Pretty much nothing going on at all. A little bit of shower and thunderstorm activity approaching the southern Windward Islands, but that's about it. And really, this area is not primed for development in late June anyway. Again, we need about another 30 to 45 days before we start watching that region closer. Now, interesting contrast here between the GFS and its ensemble members. Here it is, the INSEP GFS and the ensemble members there. This is the, I guess, the operational here, if I understand this correctly. And then your different ensemble runs, and then the envelope of that surrounding in gray. That's the way I like to think of it anyway. And basically, the GFS and its ensembles pretty much all indicating a very strong Madden-Julian oscillation pulse right into the area that would get this region fired up pretty substantially in the coming couple of weeks. But you look at the ECMWF, and it's like not going to happen. It comes in, and then it makes, what would that be, a left-hand turn, right? And goes into the phase that would more favor, maybe Africa, maybe more the Indian Ocean, really. This is Western Hemisphere and Africa, these different phases. And so that's quite a contrast there. The GFS saying, hey, favorable conditions coming towards mid-July, and the ECMWF won't have any part of that. So this will be interesting to watch. There's definitely a strong pulse of energy out there, or upward motion in the atmosphere, and I've seen different people tweeting about this, and it's moving around the globe from west to east. It takes it about 30 to 40 days on average, this MJO cycle, and it'll come back around presumably to the Western Hemisphere at some point. So maybe the euro here is off, but maybe it knows. I don't know. If I knew for sure, I'd have my own television network, right? Because I could tell you everything you wanted to know exactly when you wanted to know it. So right now we're just looking at models and guessing and making the best summations that we can. So, hey, the one thing I can tell you for sure, though, is the tropics are quiet. Going to remain that way, it looks like, through the next week, and probably that would extend through the 4th of July, so that's good too. All right, so that's it for me for today. Probably going to take a couple of days off, really not much to talk about, so there's no reason to try to drum something up that isn't there. So let's reconvene on Wednesday. We'll try to do this Monday, Wednesday, Friday this week, and might have some more to talk about then. Hey, we can at least look back and see how the duel between these two guys is going on, if there's any more coupling of those model outputs, or if they remained decoupled and quite contrasting to each other. All right, maybe we can look at that on Wednesday. Have a great rest of your Monday afternoon. Thanks as always for tuning in. I'm Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com, and I'll talk to you again on Wednesday.